You see nowadays a lot of people using the words mindfulness and meditation as if they are the same thing, if they're the same concept, the same practices. But I would like in this talk today to explain that traditionally speaking, they are not exactly the same. Using as a reference the yoga tradition, especially classic yoga like Yoga Sutras, and on the Buddhist side, especially the Pali tradition, which is the one on Theravada Buddhism here in Sri Lanka, the more classic one, you see that actually in those two schools, in those two traditions, they were considered different concepts and they had different words. For example, on the yoga tradition, classical yoga, the word that is used for mindfulness is normally Smṛti. In the Buddhist tradition, a classic word for mindfulness is Sati. But for meditation, the yoga tradition, we have the word Samādhi, and the Buddhist tradition also have the word Samādhi or Jhāna. You see, if they were the same thing, mindfulness and meditation, why would they have chosen two different words to talk about the same thing? It doesn't make sense. So of course, they must be different. When you see the word Smṛti and Sati, Sanskrit and Pali words, which are used for mindfulness, normally they actually correlated with the idea of memory. So mindfulness, traditionally speaking, is related to the idea of remembering. Now, remembering what? We could say that they use the word correlated to memory for the practitioner, the one that is doing meditation, the one that is practicing mindfulness, to remember two things. One is to remember the teachings. There's this practice, let's say, this concept of always remembering what you have studied. So we're talking here more like, let's say in a broad sense, spiritual traditions. So for you to maintain in mind the teachings of yoga, the teachings of Buddhism, let's say the teachings about the mind, the teachings about karma, the teachings about how you should behave as a human, and so on. So this idea of remembering the teachings. We also see, especially in the yoga tradition, the idea of mindfulness in terms of remembering the mantra, for example, or keeping the mantra, or let's say, lack of a better term, the sacred words in your mind at all the times, like reciting. Anyway, this idea of memory as remembering the teachings all the time. Remember what you have studied all the time, keeping it with you, keeping in your heart. Another thing that you should remember of is self-remembrance. So being always, in a way, having part of your attention always inwardness. Then we get very similar to how people nowadays will talk about mindfulness as well, which will be this: when you're walking, you're walking; when you're talking, you're talking; when you're doing anything, there's a level of remembering to pay attention to that action that is being done, or to your mind itself. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What is your mood? And so on. So mindfulness can serve both ways: remembering the teachings and self-remembrance. When we are talking about this classic mindfulness, another point to bear in mind is that the intention is for mindfulness to be more internal and less external. What I mean is, you see many teachers nowadays saying, well, mindfulness is when you brush your teeth, you pay attention to brushing your teeth. When you're walking, you pay attention to walk. When you wash your dishes, you pay attention to the wash of the dishes. That's fine, that's okay. But traditionally speaking, mindfulness is something that is more concerned with the internal world. So especially will be body sensation, and the mind itself. Again, mood, thoughts. So mindfulness is an internal direction. This is really what later will favor meditation, proper meditation, deep meditation, which is the capacity of the mind to remain sheltered in a way. Your awareness is always close to you, so internalized. That's where we get on the idea in Buddhism that normally they will talk about a right mindfulness and wrong mindfulness. Wrong mindfulness, one way to explain would be, you could be doing something that is, let's say, wrong according to the teachings, remembering the teachings. So for example, you could be committing a crime or hurting someone, or doing something that you know to be wrong, to cause problems, to cause harm to others, to yourself, and still be mindful. Now, you could be killing someone, and be mindful of that. Am I doing it properly? And am I doing it right? Am I doing it the best way? Am I doing in a way I can escape police, and so on? So you could be mindful of that action. But of course, they're not talking about mindfulness on those terms for those actions. So you see, that would be the wrong mindfulness, which is just concerned with paying attention to the action. Right mindfulness is the one that remembers the teachings. So is this action that I'm doing, is this speech that I'm talking, is this thought that I'm having proper? Is it according to the whole of the teachings, or is it against? So mindfulness has this character of kind of almost like a judgment in a good way perspective. And also it's more internal. I'm not so concerned about the external happening. I'm more concerned of the mindset of my thoughts, of the mental aspect of my existence. This will be right mindfulness. The second concept, the second term, which I spoke before, was Samādhi or Jhāna. These will be the terms that are used more for meditation. So remember, for mindfulness, the one more related to memory, Smṛti, Sati, and then for meditation will be more Samādhi, Jhāna. Classically, translations for that would be more in terms of absorption. So the idea to be absorbed. Here we are taking a step forward in which it's not enough just to be aware of something. You're trying to connect your attention to a certain extent that you lose perspective of self. Attention to space, you lose attention to time, and there's a feeling of being together, absorbed into it. So for example, even if you're just sensing the body, there's a feeling of the mind being absorbed to the body, being totally internalized in the body. There's no more separation between this is mind, this is body. When we speak about the great benefits of meditation, especially when you read the classic texts, that idea of meditation as something life-changing, of meditation as something that gives you mystical experiences, of meditation that shows you the deeper aspects of reality, the ultimate reality, especially when you go into the more side of religions that have used meditation as a source practice, such as Buddhism. Normally, when you talk about that level of experience, they are related to Samādhi, these absorption experiences, because these are the experiences that really change how you perceive yourself. As I mentioned before, these meditations, these experiences normally provide some break into your sense of self-perception. Therefore, it changes your attachment to self, your attachment to personality. It shows maybe, let's say, the interconnection between things, or it might show how the self, it's not as solid as it looks. Anyway, it gives rise to the mystical experiences that are very transformative. Those experiences are a fruit of Samādhi, deep meditation, concentration practice, stillness practice. You have to start somewhere. Normally, classically speaking, Sati, Smṛti, mindfulness comes before Samādhi or deep meditation. It's a stepping stone towards it. You need to build certain capacities of the mind to be able to reach Samādhi. It starts with basic things like capacity of attention, capacity of relaxation, to be able to relax the mind. A lot of the stillness necessary for Samādhi, for meditation, a lot of that stillness, that settling, comes from relaxation. Not even so much from focus alone, but by relaxing the mind naturally gets more attentive to the present circumstance, or to the breath, or to the object of meditation. So this training of relaxation and attention, that's a fruit that comes a lot from mindfulness. But there's a step forward. So ideally, the way that I see the issue with correlating too much mindfulness with meditation is that a lot of people stop on the mindfulness level and they never take a step forward. They never deepen their practice enough, or they don't know that there's a step forward. They think, well, I'm already doing my meditation. I'm being mindful of my actions. That's good, but there is a step forward. And the classic texts will also speak of it, will always show it, that there are certain experiences which are lurking, they are waiting to be exercised, to be experienced. And those are the practices that really show the truths of those traditions, the truth of those experiences of the yogis of the past, of the Buddha, that really show how deep, let's say, the human experience and reality can go. One last benefit of these samadhis or this deep experience of meditation is that normally at some point in the practice they bring what has been termed bliss or rapture or the pleasure of meditation. Those experiences are very important in the pathway of meditation because for two things. One is that they will give faith into the practice, because mindfulness can be a little bit boring, it can be a little bit cold in a way. It gives you too much of that sense of separation between activity, between the world and your sense of perception, your sense of consciousness. But samadhi or these deep meditations or jhana, normally they give rise, at least for some time, to a sense of bliss, a sense of pleasure. So they enhance your wanting to do the practice. Now the meditation finally becomes pleasurable. You want to do meditation because it gives you a good feeling, it gives you bliss, it gives you something to look forward. Yes, there are issues there of getting attached and so on, but leaving that aside, one other thing apart from the pleasure itself and the wanting to do the practice that will be brought forward is that those states of bliss or very strong pleasurable experiences that are fruit of meditation, you recognize that they're actually a result of the mind being calm, of the mind being peaceful, of the mind being free from extremes of desire, of hatred, extreme of emotions. So when the mind is very settled and contained, and then it gives rise to this bliss. So the nature, you probably have heard this idea that the nature of the mind is more blissful. It's ananda, it's infinite, it's blissful. Because as you experience the mind with less variation of thoughts, of emotions, of memories, of imagination, as the mind settles into itself through meditation, through samadhi, it gives rise to this experience of bliss. And then you recognize, well, at the root of the mind, at the base of the mind, there is peace. And that peace is very pleasurable. And then you want to experience it even further. So you want to drop unwanted mental states, unwanted qualities of the mind, such as agitation, jealousy, nervousness, anger, excessive desire, addictions. So everything that agitates the mind, which prevents you from experiencing that root or that source of the mind itself. So in that sense, samadhi is important to again take you a step forward, starting with mindfulness, moving to deep meditation, samadhi, jhana, and then there are other steps on the pathway as well.